Okay, so hello and welcome to the webinar. I'm delighted to have so many of you join us today for our Financial Crime and Compliance in Digital Societies Industry Insight session. So today's event isn't just to support our MSc, it's also to talk to you about the ICAPG diplomas available to study. And also we just want to talk through the qualifications available and also to provide you with a really engaging and informative industry insight session. So something that will really appeal to all our prospective students. So whether you're just starting to look at your study options, perhaps you're completing your ICAPG diploma, or you're starting your application to study the MSc in Financial Crime and Compliance at the University of Manchester. So we really hope that you'll use the Q&A function to provide us with your thoughts on today's event, but also of course to ask our expert panel any questions you might have regarding the topics we cover or about studying with us. For those who are unable to join us today, I know we've had quite a few emails through. If you're unable to join us for the live session, we will be recording today's event. So if you are watching back, hello, but also please do still send any questions through to us. You can email me at studyonline@manchester.ac.uk and I'll ensure either I come back to you with those or I can also pass them on to our guest panel today. In terms of a bit of a brief agenda for the event, there we go. So as I said, I'll hand over shortly to our panel to introduce themselves, and we'll look at the importance of academia within the industry and pathways to study the MSc via the ICA. We'll then go on to our industry insight session, which is digital risks and opportunities for financial crime compliance. And finally, we'll provide an overview of the MSc, which includes the course structure, units, and also providing some information on the practical masterclasses as well. So as I said earlier, we really do want to hear from you during today's event. So you can post any questions in the Q&A function. And what we can do is we'll go through those at the end of the session. Brilliant. Okay, so let's get started. It's my pleasure to hand over to our course director, Dr. Katie Benson.
Hi, good morning everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Sorry, I'm a little bit croaky today, so I'm hoping my voice holds out, but apologise if I sound a little bit croaky. It's really lovely to see so many people here today. As Lisa said, I'm Katie Benson. I'm one of the course directors for the MSc in Financial Crime and Compliance in Digital Societies. So a bit of background on me. I've had quite a varied career combining academia and practice. So I'm currently a lecturer in criminology here at the University of Manchester, and my main teaching focus is this master's degree. But I've taught for a number of years, both here at Manchester and at Lancaster University, mainly on financial crime, organised crime, white collar crime, and also research methods. And I've supervised PhD students in these areas as well. So my research focuses on these areas as well. My main research focus is money laundering, and in particular, I'm interested in the role that professionals such as lawyers and accountants play in enabling money laundering and how that's regulated. But I've also done research on corporate bribery, domestic bribery, and different forms of organised crime, and I've published books on money laundering and anti-money laundering. So that's the main areas of my research interests. Prior to coming into academia, I worked in various roles within UK law enforcement, in intelligence analysis and research roles, in a regional intelligence unit in England, and also at the Scottish Crime and Drug Enforcement Agency. And I've done some consultancy work with an overseas corruption investigation and other bits and pieces. I'm also, as it says, I'm also currently an Associate Fellow at the RUSI Centre for Financial Crime and Security Studies, which has allowed me to get involved with some of their policy-focused work that they do down there. So that kind of interface, that kind of interaction between academia and practice or policy has been a theme throughout my career, which is part of why I wanted to be involved in this master's degree, as that kind of interface is such an important part of what we're trying to do with it. Thanks. I'll hand over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you. I'm just trying to switch the slide forward, but I don't appear. Here we go. There we go. Just me being useless with the technology, which is a great start when you're talking about digital technologies. However, my background originally, before working for the ICA, who I've been with for 14 years now, was in financial services, originally actually as a sales and operational professional, ended up running branch networks before moving into the compliance role in 2001. And so I've got this year 21 years experience in originally compliance roles, but then in risk management, anti-money laundering. I always remember put the anti in, by the way, Katie, otherwise it does sound a bit dodgy. And also in more recent years, governance, when I was working directly with boards and frameworks around decision making. With the ICA for the last 14 years, I've been basically producing all of the courses around regulatory compliance, initially writing a lot of them myself, now doing a lot of editing as we've grown, and we bring more and more professionals globally into the external faculty that we use at the ICA. And obviously with Manchester as our quality assurance partner, been developing my relationships and working with people at Manchester for the last decade or so as well. But obviously this is our first, if you like, almost sort of joint program, needing the ICA postgraduate qualification to move on to the MSc at Manchester. So this is really exciting time for all of us. So my background very much was on the practical side, and then moving into training stroke qualifications and coming at academia from a very different angle to most people. But I really just love learning, and I really just love discussing new topics, emerging trends, emerging topics, and looking at it very much from the practical point of view. So what do we do with it? How does that affect us? How does that affect you? And obviously we live in a time full of constant change and constant challenges. So I very much enjoy the role that I have with the ICA, and I'm absolutely loving the program that we now have in conjunction with Manchester with this master's degree, this opportunity for ICA graduates to move on and complete the MSc. So that's my background, and over the next 30 minutes or so, obviously, Katie and I will hopefully give you some good insight into the programme, and then answer any questions that you might have. So I think it's back to you, Katie.
Yeah, thanks. Interesting point you made, Jonathan, about loving learning new things and learning about new developments and things like that. And that's one of the great things about working in money laundering and anti-money laundering, because I'm interested in the money laundering as well as the anti stuff, is that it is constantly developing and constantly changing. It's something that we're never going to get bored of, is it? You know, there's always going to be new things to learn about. So yeah, one of the joys of working in this area. And that link between academia and industry and the ICA that we have with this programme is really important. I was asked to come back to Manchester last year to help run this MSc. I'd been here previously and then moved away to another organisation, and it was an easy decision for me to make. There was no doubt in my mind that I wanted to do that, partly because, well, firstly because it's such a great department to be based in. There are very few, if any really, criminology departments in this country that have the research expertise in financial crime, fraud, organisational misconduct and non-compliance, and digital technologies, digital crime, cybersecurity, etc. in the way that Manchester does. It's really cementing its position as a kind of centre of excellence in digital security and in financial crime and compliance. So it's a really exciting place to be as an academic and as a researcher here at Manchester at the moment. But also partly the other thing that appeals so much is because of the unique nature of this master's degree, because at its heart is this partnership between us here in the Department of Criminology and the ICA. And like you said, the university's had a relationship with the ICA for a number of years primarily through the business school, I think, but this MSc allows us to bring together the academic expertise and the social science expertise that we have in the department with the expertise of the ICA. And yeah, just the point that's on the slide, the criminology department was ranked #1 in the UK for criminology in one of the kind of the main higher education ranking tables that we have here in the UK in 2022. And that really reflects the quality of the research and the teaching that is done more broadly right across the department. So I think what we bring to the table from the department, from the academic side of things, is the latest research on financial crime, compliance and digital security, theoretical perspectives that will allow you to think differently and just take a different way of looking at the risks that your organisation faces and the compliance work that you do, and also excuse me, also the research methods expertise that will train you to use rigorous social science methods to carry out a dissertation on an area that's of particular interest to you. And yeah, Jonathan, you could talk about what the ICA brings to the table as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ICA postgraduate diploma is our opportunity. I think is one of our bridges from, although the other qualifications we offer are qualifications, diploma, advanced certificates, they are effectively training in the areas of governance, risk, compliance, financial crime prevention. And it's when we get to the diploma level that it really sort of moves into that education element around understanding not just the technical side of compliance, but I think the point that Katie made about the social sciences is so important. As you become more senior, particularly as you then move into leadership roles, it's so much more about the relationship management and also understanding the psychology of the criminal element that you're trying to deal with as well. So yes, there's a lot to learn when it comes to the technicalities, but there's also a lot to learn about the human side of it. And as I said, that gets more and more important the more senior you become. So we've always been focused, the ICA, on the practical application of the knowledge. And maybe that's where, as I say, in the more junior qualifications we've been teaching people how to do things and why to do them. But as we get into the more senior qualifications, such as the postgraduate, which I'll cover in a bit more depth a bit later on in this session, we do start getting much more into that social side of it in terms of understanding the behaviors of other stakeholder groups. And that includes the legislators, the industry, the criminals, and also their approach to the technologies and the emerging technologies and the changes in technology and the impact that those groups have on it. And that all gives you a fantastic foundation for then going ahead and saying, so what do we do about it? And I use the question, so what, so often when I'm teaching. Somebody will come up with a really insightful idea, be quite pleased with themselves, and then I will go, that's interesting, so what? And we go into the practical application side of it. So this course brings all of that together at the pinnacle of the two sort of streams that you would enter this kind of area in terms of studying. Although, of course, you go on and do a PhD if you wish, where you can choose your own subject matter, but this will get you to that level. And it's great to have the master's qualification now that is a direct route from the ICA qualifications. Where are we next? There we go. Oh, the pathways. So this is still me, isn't it? Right. Okay. So in terms of the pathways into the MSc, this qualification is exclusive to holders of the ICA's professional postgraduate diplomas. And we have two of them. So we have two options at the moment that you can specialize in, although they're still quite broad specialisms. The first is a professional postgraduate diploma in governance, risk and compliance. So it focuses on those three main areas, the interaction between governance, risk and compliance, and how, for example, compliance itself is first of all part of that model as an area of risk, managing regulatory risk. But the whole area of governance and risk is itself regulated. So it's quite a complex regulatory environment to understand. But again, taking key subjects such as leadership communications, establishing the appropriate culture, understanding the technology, the risks it brings, the benefits it brings, and how to manage the risks whilst obtaining those benefits. All of this is done at the leadership level. It's a combination of understanding management, but focusing on leadership. So a case of setting strategies, understanding what the options are, not necessarily the technical how-to detail, but deciding what should be done in terms of a strategy for governance, risk and compliance. And the other stream is financial crime compliance, or financial crime prevention, in fact, which is broader than just compliance. And we look at financial crime prevention as a slightly separate issue. It includes anti-money laundering, bribery and corruption, internal fraud, various other areas of financial crime. In terms, again, of setting the strategy. What is the strategic approach we need to take? And how do we then set up frameworks to enable our businesses or our organizations to implement those strategies? Some of the detail, again, that can be covered in other qualifications, and the day-to-day activities are quite often in a larger firm, certainly delegated. But at the level for the postgraduate qualification, it's understanding what the overall outcome or objectives are of managing governance, risk and compliance, or managing financial crime prevention to minimize the risks, but also to take advantage of all the areas that these things bring in terms of, demonstrating to stakeholders, which includes your customers, and of course includes society as a whole, the ESG agenda sort of really beginning to come front and center of a lot of what we do, that your organization is one that can be trusted. And somebody did bring up the trust element a few weeks ago in a particular workshop I was in, and it struck me how much more important that is becoming. One of the topics, in fact, one of the social sciences topics that we've been discussing a lot in the last few months is the differences between different generations. And the fact that I think a lot of what's being driven from the ESG agenda now is actually coming from younger generations. And they are the ones sort of forcing through or pushing through the changes that organizations are having to make when it comes to ESG and organizations' impact. So 2 different routes, 2 different qualifications, each has a slightly different syllabus. There is, of course, overlap because you have to have governance, risk and compliance overseeing your financial crime compliance. So the financial crime compliance element is a little more focused, usually undertaken by heads of or directors of anti-money laundering or fraud risk or financial crime risk. And the GRC, sometimes it includes those people as well. Other times it's more focused on heads of risk, directors of risks, heads of compliance, reporting into directors of risks. And it's all about, as I say, either making those strategic decisions or bringing the information to the table and the advice to the table for those people at the very top of an organization to make those decisions. And the final thing I would say about the actual 2 programs that you can't really put into the syllabus that's really beneficial is the networking. And the fact that obtaining this qualification gives you fellowship of the ICA. And every cohort, and we keep the cohorts below 30, normally around 25 or so, every cohort stays in contact with each other. They create their own networking groups. They work together on the projects and the assessments that are set during the course, and some long-term professional networking frameworks are set up. And quite a few of the fellows then continue to work with the ICA, providing us with their expertise, with writing, sometimes even teaching for us. So it's a part of becoming part of the, I would say, the ICA family, which might sound a bit twee, but those networks and having people that you can talk to at your level about the topics you manage is actually a real benefit of the course. Okay.
Okay, thanks very much, Jonathan. Yeah, really interesting insight into the 2 different streams that you have there at the ICA. So just for this next 10 minutes or so, we're going to just focus in on one particular aspect. So as you will be obvious from the title of the master's degree, a key focus of the degree is the digital environment that we all now live and work in. So as experienced compliance professionals, I'm sure that you are all well aware of the digital transformations that have impacted or are starting to impact on your roles and your organisations. So it was really important for us in developing this MSc that we incorporate that into its focus. So just for the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that the digital landscape and that emerging digital technologies are creating for compliance, but also some of the opportunities for compliance and risk management and regulation that new digital technologies and digital systems can provide. So if you want to kind of contribute, you can write in the chat, in the Q&A, the kind of challenges that the digital landscape has created for you, perhaps specifically in your roles. So Jonathan, I know when we were talking about this earlier, you were thinking particularly about data use, data security risks, that kind of thing has been a key issue for the industry these days.
Yeah, well, for me, when somebody mentions the word digital, the first thing that sort of comes to mind is the fact that the only reason that we talk of we talk about what we do as a digital environment or digital risks and opportunities is because we've gone down this route of data being held digitally. Very little data now is actually held physically, and it's very difficult to do anything with data that's held physically. So it's the digital enablement that's taken us down this route of changing basically what data is. And again, going back to the joy of learning, when I joined the ICA 10 years ago, this kind of thing would never have occurred to me, but it occurred to me over the last few years, as we've been sort of discussing how technology has developed, that data itself has changed from being a tool where we would use data for whatever decision making we had or to identify trends or whatever it might be, to becoming a commodity as well as a tool because of the amount of data and the different types of data we have. But the technology for collecting data has grown faster than our ability to know what we can do with it. And certainly a heck of a lot faster than the regulatory environment to manage it. So it's the changing nature of data and the technology that's driven it that has created this environment we now find ourselves in. And I think everybody is playing catch up to the technological developments. It's almost like we're playing with the technology, seeing what it can do, and then trying to work out, so what do we do with this? And a good example is, and I don't know if this is completely true, but it sounds true and it's a good story, is that all of the data that the human race created from when it began, and depending on which textbook you read, human beings have been around for about 250,000 years, up until 2016, so that's everything that we wrote down first of all, or we copied, or we saved, or created in some way, and then we had the beginning of the computer generation. That data that we collected for 250,000 years up to 2016, we doubled it in the next 3 years. So between 2016 and 2019, we created the same amount of data because we now have such a capability for creating data. And you can read the data collection details online if you want to, but it uses terms like quadzillions and numbers that you just can't grasp. And it's that really, I think, has driven the opportunities and the risks. So when terms like big data are used, that's what we mean. And it sounds like a really sort of juvenile term, big data, but it just means there's so much. But what do we do with it? And that, of course, leads to the risks. Because we might think, great, how can we use this for the benefit of humankind? You know, if we're being really positive about it. There's a whole group of people out there, generally known as criminals, who will say, how can I use this for my own personal gain? And the advantage criminals have over us, of course, are that they can be early adopters and they don't have to do due diligence. They can basically just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And they will. They'll use new technologies, first of all, to carry out traditional crimes in more advanced ways. That's why we see so much phishing, You know, I'm old enough to remember getting letters from Nigerian princes asking me to fund them through their court case. And of course, so that's just improving the efficiency of existing crimes, to the creation of new crimes, such as denial of service attacks. And it's those kind of sort of criminal activities that we then have to respond and react to. So how do we do that effectively so we can still get the benefits of having all of this wonderful data? We can reach people. You know, when people complain about things like social media, it's because they're thinking about the negatives. It's actually brings so much benefit: information, data, knowledge, education, you know, access to medical records. There's so many things that are positives, but there is that underlying risk that we do face, both from criminal elements, and of course there can be sort of a grey area where it may be that it's not criminal activity, but we're not looking after our data properly. We're not storing it properly. We're holding data we shouldn't really be holding when there's no need to. So there's this sort of the regulatory issues as well that a lot of pressure groups, maybe even governments as well, are quite keen to manage and to look after. That eventually ends up on our table as compliance and risk professionals. How do we manage all of those, what I've just described, really high level issues, in terms of how a regulator might say, well, we're going to regulate this. Can they do it effectively? Is it even possible? We have the general data protection regulations as our sort of new, quite wide-ranging data legislation in Europe for the last few years. But even by the time it was launched, it was already to a degree out of date, because the technology and the ideas and creativity of using data is ongoing day by day by day. Whereas the legislation has to be written, approved, agreed, implemented, rolled out. It's out of date by the time it's there. So how do we deal with those anomalies as well? These are the kind of questions that I love discussing, but it does get to that point of, so how do we manage that in the workplace?
Yeah, I agree with everything there, Jonathan. Really interesting points. And we start off this unit within the Masters, basically talking about this idea of the datafication of society that you mentioned, just this vast increase in data that is out there, the hyper-connected nature of everything we do, and what that means for compliance professionals. And we really get students in that first part of the unit to think about what does that mean to them in their roles, in their particular organisations. What does that increased amount of data? What does it mean to them, and what impact has it had on their role? And you mentioned the idea of you can have kind of cyber-enabled crime and cyber-dependent crime. So we have these crimes that basically have always been there, but they've just been fine-tuned and they've just been made quicker or more effective, more efficient because of digital technologies kind of allowing that. And we talk about those, but we also talk about new crimes that are dependent on the digital society, the digital systems, crimes that have been created. And you talked about a whole range of those types of crimes: phishing, hacking, DDoS attacks, that kind of thing. And we talk a lot about that in the course. So part of the unit focuses on different types of cyber attacks, different types of financial crimes that can affect students' organisations. And then we spend time, and we have a couple of weeks in the unit talking about cybersecurity and what people can do within their organisations to better protect their organisations. And on one of our masterclasses a few weeks ago, we had a professor of cybersecurity from here at Manchester talking about around those things, and had students doing some really interactive stuff around thinking about how to better protect systems. One of the other things, I'll come to that. One of the things that I was talking about I was thinking about when you were speaking was the role of fintech and the emergence of the fintech sector. You talked about how practically we deal with these volumes of data and things like that. And in the last, I don't know, 15 years, I think 2008 was seen as the start of the fintech era, and we've seen this explosion of new fintech startups and fintech organizations. And we look at the emergence of the fintech sector and the potential kind of compliance, anti-financial crime, anti-money laundering solutions that those kind of organizations can provide, both in terms of reg tech for the regulated sector and sup tech for the regulators. So things like automated transaction monitoring, using AI and machine learning for risk identification and monitoring. And for regulators, the kind of emerging technological solutions to improve oversight, to improve surveillance. AI and machine learning can be used quickly to identify patterns more quickly than humans can, and do predictive analysis of markets and identify potential issues in high volumes of regulatory filings. So there's this huge array of new solutions out there which are there to support people in compliance roles and support people working in financial services and the different sectors that require this. But there's lots of also, I think, potential risks from these kind of new technological solutions to compliance, and that's something that we try and think about on the course. So some of you'll probably be able to think of some more than me, Jonathan, but some of the ones I can think of are things like cost to start with. So the cost for organisations to purchase these kind of products, the training that they might need, perhaps the recruitment of specialist staff. And if they don't recruit specialist staff, the lack of expertise within organisations to properly effectively use the kind of fintech solutions that can be purchased from third parties. You talked about data security. And kind of the more digital solutions I think that are used, then the more vulnerabilities are created for data security. So you may be introducing cyber vulnerabilities by using kind of third-party fintech solutions. They also obviously are going to have limitations. All new technologies have limitations. So there may be the risk that they over-detect, kind of detect spurious rather than meaningful signals. So you may still need to maintain that kind of manual oversight. And one of the things that we talked about with our students quite a lot in, I think it was at the masterclass as well, was the importance of human still. You know, when we have all these digital solutions, the importance of the human, the importance of compliance actors still working alongside the technology. And then just the practical aspects of innovating novel technologies into existing processes and systems, which we always have. So I think lots of opportunities for technological solutions to support compliance, but risks there as well. And I guess balancing that is the key.
Yeah. And the couple of points you're making there, I mean, particularly around the use, for example, of AI coming through as it's a fantastic and wonderful tool if it's programmed properly at the beginning, and if somebody keeps an eye on it to make sure it doesn't go off and start doing strange things. Because AI, you know, is like normal intelligence. We have bad days. So can AI systems. It's changing the role of the human, if you like, from being the data processor to the data overseer, and trying to make sure that the technology we're using is doing what we want from it. And that's certainly something I found very interesting, because I've always been quite interested in human biases and why we behave irrationally. And it's really fascinating to see that AI, right from the day one, does exactly the same thing. So technology is a fantastic tool, but it is still only as good as the person who develops it, codes it, writes it. Is it fit for purpose at the outset? And then if it has some form of machine learning or AI in it, is it going to continue to be fit for purpose and do the job it needs? And I think one of the stresses that puts on people working in compliance or GRC type roles is having enough knowledge to ask the right questions. We don't have to be coders and understand the coding that's going on, but we have to understand what we expect for the technology to do and identify perhaps when it's starting to do something unexpected, and how to utilize it to achieve our outcome, as opposed to one of the dangers with fintech or regtech is that off-the-shelf solutions or third-party solutions Are they actually going to achieve the outcomes that individual firms particularly require? Because we don't all want exactly the same thing from technology. We might all have different requirements from our RegTech and FinTech solutions. So it's great that there is an industry out there providing these products and services, but there's that risk of us making sure we get the right use of technology and then being able, as you mentioned, to use it, having the knowledge and understanding enough not to be able to design your own FinTech product, but be able to manage and utilize one effectively, and not become over-reliant on them as well. There is a risk that we say, well, we know what that's doing, so we'll check everything that comes out at the end of that process. If it raises red flags, great, we'll investigate them. And you might investigate the red flags perfectly, but is it identifying all of the red flags? How do we know that? You know, if we don't understand how it identifies red flags. So still a lot of human input required. It's just perhaps, if you like, getting a lot of the sort of the more manual data processing done for us. But we need to obviously still have that risk awareness of what new risks it brings to light.
And I think one thing you said there was really important, and one thing that we try and stress is that perhaps not all the detail that we cover in the unit will be directly relevant to everyone, but it's about having that language and that understanding, and being able to talk perhaps to the IT department in your organization, the coders, the data specialists, that kind of thing, making sure you have the language around cybersecurity and digital aspects. It allows you to have that those conversations to do your compliance job effectively.
And it's amazing what we don't know about cybersecurity, things we don't know until it's pointed out to us. You know, before I started looking into it properly and getting involved, I was already on Facebook, I was already using online systems, and all of a sudden you realize how much personal information you've put out there. And again, there might be a generational piece coming along here. Younger generations expect to use this technology all the time. They already see the benefits of it. But that came along before the risks were perhaps identified, and we understood how we need to manage and regulate these risks and oversee them. So we're constantly playing catch up, and people have got used to the freedom of using data, used to the freedom of access to data. And it's going to be quite hard if we want to try and pull that back and rein that in. So how else can we manage the risks? What else could we potentially do? Does it become more about education and end user than the technology itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to run over time, but just quickly, something else that we haven't touched on, but which is very much part of the landscape these days, is cryptocurrencies, virtual assets. Even though, I don't know, maybe cryptocurrencies are reaching their peak, perhaps we'll wait and see. But what do you think the implications for compliance professionals are in the rise of crypto?
Well, it's fascinating, obviously, what's going on right at the moment, and that's another why this whole area is so interesting. Was it yesterday that oh crikey, I've forgotten his name now. It's amazing how famous names just disappear from your head. But they sold all of that to the people that own the Tesla cars, etc.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Thank you. Sold all his Bitcoin, okay, yesterday. Apparently, obviously it's a newspaper report, and who knows what you can believe when you read in the media, especially what type of digital media you're reading. But the whole Bitcoin thing, the issue there potentially is, of course, it was the first, it was the most famous initially. And is it actually a true representation of a cryptocurrency and what it will or will not do? Is much more of a speculative investment. Not really a cryptocurrency. It ended up being used as a cryptocurrency, and that was how it was perhaps presented. But its usage is what's led to what's happened. So I think going forward, we're already seeing governments getting involved, as well as large institutions, in having much more controlled crypto assets, whether they're currencies, whether there are other types of crypto asset, things like initial coin offerings. Really useful tools, really good ways of getting new ideas, new businesses up and running. So there is a lot of benefits of crypto assets, but it's a new market, it's been volatile. That in itself is going to worry certain people. And as I say, it attracted speculative investment. So it's probably a cycle we've had to go through, and whether we're completely through that initial speculative investment process yet is debatable, but we are seeing now more mainstream crypto assets coming along. And in fact, some people don't realize, you know, most of us already have a crypto asset, because technically, if you have a reward scheme with any organization, that's a crypto asset, but it's a very simple, well-controlled one that's not particularly attractive to criminals, although there has been some criminality around them. But things like Nectar points or whatever your petrol station rewards you with, they're crypto assets. So they are becoming part of mainstream. And I think it's a case of they're here to stay. You can't put them back in the box and say, we're not going to do anything with that. And therefore, you know, going forward, we've got to try and say, so how do we avoid the volatility? How do we manage the financial crime risk associated here? Because we're talking about assets that don't exist. So you don't have to steal a thing. You are stealing data, which is a lot easier to steal than physical assets. And you know, and when I say things are getting away from the volatile area, look at what's happened with NFTs in the last year. So, you know, the first tweet, I think it was, somebody bought for $500,000, wanted to sell for 50 million. And the highest bid he got was $6,000. You know, it is, you know, a really strange area to be in at the moment. And I'd avoid it like the plague from an investment point of view, although it's not investment advice, but it's here to stay. So it is a payment methodology, or certainly with blockchain as well, the distribution models for crypto assets. Blockchain is a fantastic model if we can get it working properly, if everybody understands it and we use it appropriately. But we're running out of time, so I can't start going on and on about it. But again, it's a fascinating area that we need to understand enough about, I think, again, is the first stage, to ask the right questions, identify the benefits and identify the risks. Then we can start thinking about how we manage them, and ideally for the benefit of yourself, your firm, your industry.
Yeah, I agree, and it's something we look at in the course. Could never cover everything related to the course, but we look at the kind of the rise of cryptocurrencies, the way cryptocurrencies are used on the dark net. We talk a little bit about that by criminals, how that kind of started off, Silk Road and things like that. And we talk about distributed ledger technology and blockchains and the potential power of blockchain for investigations and prevention and things like that. Yeah. And we also talk a little bit about regulating virtual asset service providers and thinking about what you said about GDPR legislation before, and how that moves on, how that doesn't move on quickly. You know, it doesn't move on quickly, and if we move on quicker than that, the legislation catch up, and the kind of the complications of having regulations in place to regulate virtual asset service providers and things like that. So it's a huge area in itself, and we try and touch as much on that as possible in the course. So I think perhaps if we finish that section there, Lisa, and then I'll just move on to talk a little bit about, just give the attendees a brief overview of the MSc.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Yeah, that was a really interesting session. Thank you.
I don't seem. No.
The only problem you have when you're talking about this stuff is trying to get enough in what to leave out and when to shut up.
I know, exactly. You could talk about it all day, couldn't you? But still not untouched on all of it. Okay, so I'll now just give you a bit more detail about the content and structure of the course. Excuse me, hopefully if my voice holds out. So as we've mentioned, the course is for experienced professionals working in various roles in compliance, governance and regulation who have completed a postgraduate diploma with the ICA. So this puts you in a really kind of exclusive group of professionals in your sector who have this kind of combined qualification. So the ICA diploma will give you 60 credits towards the 180 that you need for a master's degree. So this course will give you those further 120 credits over 12 months, giving you a master's degree, an MSc, in combination with your PG Dip from the ICA. So the course is designed to provide you with knowledge and understanding of various financial crime and compliance risks, or to enhance your understanding of the kind of risks that you'll already be familiar with through your role. To introduce you to academic research on financial crime and compliance, and to concepts and theories from academic research that you can apply to your own experience, to give you different ways of thinking about the challenges that you face in your organisation or in your role. to give you the opportunity to learn from your peers and from experts in the field, as well as from the learning materials that we provide. So you'll engage in discussion tasks with your peers and come together 3 times during the year in the weekend masterclasses I'll talk about in a minute. To enhance your understanding of the issues that we've been talking about today, the risks and opportunities for compliance and regulation created by the evolving digital landscape. And finally, it's also been designed to give you the skills and the opportunity to carry out an original research project on a subject of your choice through the final dissertation, which I'll talk more about as well. Could you move the next slide, please, Lisa? I don't seem to be moving. Thank you. So there are 4 units on the course. Excuse me, sorry. There are 4 units on the course to make up that 120 credits to add to the 60 you would already have from your diploma. Units 1, 2 and 3 are 20 credit modules, which each take place over a 10-week period. And then Unit 4 is a dissertation project, which is 60 credits, and so makes up the remaining third of the programme. In Unit 1, which is about analysis and explanation of compliance and financial crime risk, we look at some of the key concepts around financial crime and compliance and explain the benefits of using social science theory to help us understand financial crime risks in more depth and to understand the broader context of compliance work. So we introduce you to some key criminological theories on financial crime and non-compliance, and methods for analysing different forms of non-compliance. So the assessment for this unit allows you to take these concepts, theories and modes of analysis and apply them to a particular case of your choice. So it allows you to see how these more kind of abstract ideas can help you to understand issues of relevance to your workplace. In Unit 2, as I've spoken about, we focus on digital technologies, financial crime and compliance. So in this unit, we begin by looking at the hyper-connected, data-intensive context that you operate in and what this means for your organisation and your role. We look at the various potential cyber threats to your business and how you can keep your digital systems secure. We look at cryptocurrencies and at RegTech and SupTech, and again, throughout all this, tasks and discussion boards that you'll engage in are designed to make you think about how all these things apply directly to your role in your workplace. Unit 3 begins to get you ready for carrying out your dissertation. So we'll look at some of the different methods of carrying out compliance research and some of the challenges with doing this kind of research. And we'll take you through the process of identifying research questions, selecting appropriate research methods and designing financial crime research. And we'll also talk about some of the compliance data and corruption statistics and things like that that are already out there and how you can interpret those and think critically about those. So there's some overlap between Unit 3 and Unit 4 as we provide those fundamentals or foundations of doing research within Unit 3. And then Unit 4 is a dissertation project, and there are 3 pathways for you to choose from here. So you can either do an individual research project, which is a kind of classic traditional dissertation, which will be a 12 to 15,000 word dissertation involving some empirical research. If you didn't want to do quite so much kind of empirical research and such a big dissertation, you can do a short dissertation, which is 6 to 8,000 words. And then alongside that, to kind of make up the credit, you would do 3 research focused kind of mini units to give you a bit more kind of research training. And then you also have the option of doing a group dissertation. So if you have common interests with other students on the course, you can choose to work as a group of 3 to 5 to produce a group dissertation. So for Units 1 to 3, the majority of the materials are online for you to work through at your own pace. So this is to allow you to kind of fit it around your own work schedules. So this includes textual materials, videos, and various tasks for you to complete to consolidate and check your learning, reading lists, and discussion boards for you to discuss ideas and issues with your peers. So we've tried to design it to make it as flexible as possible for you to fit it around your work and around different time zones, things like that. You also have the opportunity to meet with us, your course tutors, every week for individual one-on-one discussions. And you'll have 3 weekend masterclasses held at the university around halfway through each of the 3 units. So, moving on. So these masterclasses run from Friday lunchtime to Sunday lunchtime and involve sessions from us, myself and my colleague, Professor Nick Lord, but also, more interestingly, from external speakers. So that's either colleagues from the ICA, such as Jonathan, or we have had this year an expert in cybersecurity, behavioural scientists who advise on decision-making and compliance processes for financial services, a head of risk and compliance at a global bank. So we have external speakers coming in as well. And these weekends really allow you to develop your networks with the speakers, but also with your peers, and help to build that really strong kind of network that you can make with your peers on the course. And they'll consolidate the learning that you've done online during the weeks. Okay, and then just a final slide, Lisa. This just gives a summary of how the timetable works, basically. So we run from the first week of September. Units 1, 2, and 3 are 10 weeks, as I said. Weeks 1 to 4 and 6 to 9 have these online materials for you to work through at your own pace. And in weeks 5 and 10, there are no new materials. These weeks are there for you to catch up and consolidate what you've done, and consolidate your learning and work on your assessments. And then we have a 20-week dissertation project. Thanks, Lisa, and I'll hand over to you to finish off.
I'm going to interrupt Lisa just 1 second, because I forgot to mention when I was talking about the postgrad that we have got entry for the 2 postgrads coming up as well. I think the financial crime begins on the 1st of August, so you'd have to be quick for that one, but we can get the application through quick enough. And the governance, risk and compliance begins on the 28th of August. So there's a little bit more time there, and there were those links on the screen earlier, but if you Google the International Compliance Association, you'll find us.
Thanks, Jonathan. I was going to say as well, I think the email address we have is icainfo@int-comp.org. So please, again, you can either email the ICA or please email me at the email address on the slide, studyonline@manchester.ac.uk, and I'll be able to point you in the right direction. So that was so informative. Thank you very much. As you can see just on the current slide, our next course start date is this September. So as the session today has attracted students from, whether you're new to the student journey, considering studying with the ICA or with the MSc, or perhaps you've already, you've received an offer to study with us. If you have, congratulations. However, to confirm your offer, please do make sure you've accepted that. And as I said, we can guarantee your place on the course. We still have a limited number of places available. So as I said, if you are considering to study with us, but maybe have some questions that you want to go through, or you're looking at your application and you're unsure of what information we require from you, just let me know and I'll be able to support you with that. I know we had a couple of questions come through. I've managed hopefully to answer some of those direct, but if you have got any, please just keep popping them on the chat now. In regards to the session, I said it is recorded today, so what we can do is make sure that that's sent round, I said, to anybody who's unable to attend, but also for those of you that have managed to join us today, you'll also be sent a copy. So I said, you can watch that back at your convenience and just let us know if there's anything you're unsure of. And as I said, we are now accepting applications, so please do, as I said, submit now, just to ensure you secure your place. And then we did have a question in regards to intakes, just that we had 2 intakes in September. However, moving forwards, we are going to 1 intake per year. So in 2023, we'll be going to September 2023 intakes. We won't have one in February. So as I said, if you are quite keen to get started with your studies, I'd recommend submitting an application this year rather than waiting until 2023. But I don't think we've had any more questions come through yet, which is good, because I think we've obviously had such a great session today. We're already running up to the hour, which is brilliant. Katie, Jonathan, anything else you'd like to add at all?
Ooh, sign up for either the postgrad or for the MSc, because it's great fun. As well as all the other stuff, it's fun.
It's fun,
I
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and as Jonathan said, for those of you who haven't yet got the diploma, then yeah, there's dates starting for those, so as well in August. So lots of opportunities coming up for whatever situation you're at, whatever stage you are at.
And thinking about it, the 2 postgrad courses that begin in August, they will be completed in time to join the September 23 intake. Because the postgrad course, although it says I think 10 to 12 months, it's normally within 10 months. And if anybody's particularly keen to join the postgrad, we can always sort of facilitate the final assessment to make sure it's done in time.
Brilliant, thank you, Jonathan. As I said, with the moving to 1 intake per year as well, that is actually in line with all our other courses. It was just for the launch that we had the 2 intakes, so it's not, there's no reason behind us cutting back to 1 intake per year. It is purely just to fall in line with many of our other online and blended courses. So yeah, fantastic session, Jay. Thank you very much, guys. As I said, if anybody's watching now and has any questions, just send them through. And as I said, if you are considering to study with us, please do get your applications sooner rather than leaving it to the last moment. But thank you so much, Katie and Jonathan. It's been really good today.
No problem.
Thank you. Cheers, Lisa. See you, Katie.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.